Everyone. Welcome back to another hip dysplasia patient experience interview. My name is Ashley Spalla and I'm with Miles for Hips. And today we have Kelli Kirkland. Kelli began her career in health and wellness as an adjunct professor and an interpreter at Louisiana Delta Community College in 2005. She began her own company, Exercise Prescriptions, bridging the gap between medical and fitness in 2018. She works with community centers and contracts with physiotherapy clinics, developing programs post physiotherapy discharge, both in land and aquatics. She has 17 years experience as a physiotherapist assistant in home health, inpatient rehab, skilled nursing facilities, acute outpatient, adult pediatric orthopedic, and neurological clinics. And fun fact, her dad was a champion street drag racer and master mechanic. And she was a helper at age 10 with brake jobs and anything she could do to fix engines. So as a high school graduation was drag racing at the local track. She still has her first car, a 1967 Mercury Cougar. Welcome, Kelli.
That was a long introduction. Thank you, Ashley. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a nice, hot Louisiana day, so can't complain.
Beautiful. Well, let's get this started.
Okay.
What one thing has helped you the most during your hip dysplasia journey?
One thing was support, like you, Miles for Hips, just having knowing someone else that's gone through the experience and having your questions answered. The group is so good at the information and just having that community, and then also advocacy. What's the next steps? Here's the surgery, and then what's next, and then there's opportunities to help that all these organizations provide. So I do believe that we never go through things without the benefit of helping or the purpose to help other people. So that's the one of the things that's helped the most during this journey, having others like yourself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely believe the same thing. Support is such a huge key factor in this process, for sure.
Absolutely.
What do you wish others knew about hip dysplasia?
Well, this is the funny part. It's not just in dogs. I get that all the time. You had hip dysplasia. You mean the same thing that's in German Shepherds? I'm like, well, yes. I'm glad you realize German Shepherds have this, but people have this. So that's the main thing. It's not in dogs, it's in humans, and we're born with it. That's the number two thing. We're born with it. And then they asked me, well, why you had your surgery so late? And I'm like, well, they didn't catch it when I was the baby. And that's part of the initiative, is getting the awareness and advocacy out that yes, it's in babies, but most oftentimes there's no symptoms, or it's just not checked, and the symptoms are not there. So those are the big things I see. It's just, that's what advocacy and awareness is, just that yes, it's congenital and it's not just in dogs. So that's what the big things for this month. And just people do ask questions, and that's why this month is so good, with June. And so just education, just defining what is hip dysplasia. And I love the way Mouse for Hips did the angles, that initiative with the angle, explaining all the angles. So I've been able to use that talking to others about it. It's geometry. It's about geometry.
That's amazing. Awesome. And thank you so much for using one of our resources.
Absolutely.
What is something positive that has come out of your hip dysplasia journey?
Something positive. I think the most important thing is that I became a success story because I'm a success story. I can help others become a success, specifically returning to sports. So that's been a huge thing for me. What I've learned, I feel like I'm a case study, and I think I am. I'm like one of one case study. And since there's such a lack of evidence based research, that there's such a low number of us, for the rest of my life, I'm a research project, my own case study. I'm always learning. I'm always just researching, and just researching on myself. Okay, can I do, a tough mudder? Can I do, what is my body able to do post surgeries? And it's fun uh, to be able to see and be creative. I'm also, being a patient and a provider is a kind of a double-edged sword. But from a provider perspective, I'm constantly seeking, ways to improve my skills. I've gone on to improve. I have a certification in myofascial decompression. I'm looking at a certified yoga therapist. Like the things that's been helpful for me in rehab, those are things I'm honing in on as far as a professional career. So those are the main things.
That's wonderful. Now, can you explain to us some of the things that you like to do activity-wise post PAO?
Post PAO. So the first thing I did, and it's Tough Mudder. It's a brand, but I was
Mhm.
able to do three of them post op. I did
Wow.
9 months post op my left. And one of the videos that I have on one of my pages is me climbing Mudderhorn, which is 3 stories. It's climbing and then running, coming over. That was super terrifying, but I did it. And it was
That's
kind of like
amazing.
proving to myself that I could do it, and proving to others, and especially my surgeons, because after I finished, they are like my biggest cheerleaders. They're like, okay, Kelli, what you going to do next? So I'm like, okay, I didn't hurt myself. I did this safely. I trained for it. And so that was like one of my first events. Um, Post PAOs. And then I did another one in the United Kingdom, which was my first trip outside of the
Oh,
US.
wow.
And that whole process post op, being in an airplane that long with your hips, I was 9 months post op. That was a journey, just learning, being in that position, seating. We don't like sitting very long, and just the swelling. And I was like, well, this is interesting. So the whole trip there, then to do the Mudderhorn and hiking, I was like, okay, surgeons, I'm doing great. I'm really testing your work here. So those are very exciting for me to return to as far as activities. Hiking, I went hiking in Wales. Also, a Rocket Chicks. It's called Rocket Chicks. Sprint triathlon is just for women. That was my first
Oh,
triathlon
wow.
12 or 14 years ago after I learned how to swim. I learned how to swim as an adult. And so that was so nice to be able to do that triathlon after these surgeries. It's like, okay, it's like now it's like a restart. I did these activities with hip dysplasia, and now I don't have hip dysplasia. Let's see, post operatively what I could do. So that was great. I also did um, a similar race that I first did 12 years ago. My first half Ironman distance was Riveroo, and I didn't, it's now an Olympic distance. So I also completed that one post op. And the biggest thing uh, was the quarter marathon. That was 1 year post op, my last PAO. That was the best run of my life. I had no hip pain. And I knew that my training, I had coaches, that helped me. I had a good team, a village of people helping me train. And it was hard work. 5 surgeries in 2 years is hard, and just remapping, and just, those old motor patterns, and just trying to train the right way. So that quarter marathon 1 year, post op, with no pain, and I actually had a little bit of speed. I wasn't a good runner. I just did it. But yeah, that quarter marathon was like, woohoo, yes, I've succeeded. Tell the others. I am my oldest. I'm the oldest patient for my surgeons. Does
Wow,
that make
that's
so
amazing.
I'm like I feel like
Like,
the mother, of the mother of hips and hope, and I'm like, okay, if I can do it at my age, all these teenagers of yours, and so I had something to prove just internally because I'm their oldest patient, and so again, um, that's another motivation, I guess, for doing all these activities and getting back into sport. Just say, okay, I did it. I could do it, and I did it without pain, and that was a crowning event. The most recent race
that's
that I
awesome.
did was the Little Rock Half Marathon. Very
Ooh,
fun race, very big
yeah.
meadow. I didn't do a lot of running. Actually, I did a lot of walking. I wasn't really trained for it. I just kind of did it on a whim, but I loved it. So, and my hips did great. I mean, and there are certain things, and because I provide physical therapy services, I know what things I can push myself to do. And I have an athletic background. And so. Um, I know how to, gauge the exercise activities. And hey, I did a half marathon, post op. So those
Is
are
there
things I
anything
enjoy.
you're,
I haven't been back to drag racing yet. I've had a little, but the race car is ready. I just need
is that
a
what you're
truck and a
hoping
trailer.
to eyeing to do next? Is that on the horizon? Is there something you're like, what are you hoping to do next?
I'm just coasting now. I'm just having
Just
fun.
coasting, just
I
having
don't.
fun. I like
I,
it.
I haven't
Love
proved,
it.
um, I
Having
have
fun is
some
a
bucket
great
list
goal.
things. Maybe go. Yeah, I think I want to go to Alaska and Hawaii and, do some
Ooh,
hiking and stuff like that. So
yes. That sounds beautiful. Love it.
that's my hips allow me to do anything I want. That's how I feel.
That's amazing. What are you hoping will improve with hip dysplasia diagnoses or care in the future?
Okay, I am hoping that um, the checkups as infants, what I'm really hoping for. Infants, whatever the guidelines are with the pediatricians, whether 6 months, a year, let's see that to 5 years, and then, as I've had so many patients say, or the moms will say, when they went through puberty, they had hip pain, but we thought it was growing pains. And so when you have these teenagers with hip pain, have them, bring them back, check them out, check these hips out for hip dysplasia, just getting them sooner. I guess that's what I would really love to see is not just, let's do birth, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year checkups. And then if there's any symptoms that are, just, I guess, more education for, before puberty. And then once they're adolescents, just if there's hip pain, hey, let's check them out for hip dysplasia because I find that most healthcare providers just forget. They think it's a baby, it's just for babies. And, same thing in my field with my colleagues and just educating other therapists. They learn about hip dysplasia in their pediatric class and they think, okay, I'm going to adult outpatient clinic. So they don't even think about hip dysplasia anymore because that was a pediatric class that they didn't have to worry about because they weren't going to, work with peds. You see how the mindset is, and it's just forgotten. And I experienced that myself. I had therapy a very long time for my hip. It was called a lot of things, and it was hip dysplasia all along.
Same. I mean, I passed my hip click test as a baby and was fine and never knew I had it until college. So, yeah, I totally would agree with you on that. I would love to see more like ultrasounds for babies and more testing done and definitely would agree with that. What opportunities do you see for patients and families to get involved in hip dysplasia advocacy?
Uh, yeah. National Day of Movement that you guys have. We have our annual, and this is part of the flyer we have. the Hippies hike. So 5 months post-op, my first PAO, I went to this area. It's a state historic site in Port Hudson, Louisiana, and I was able to hike that 5 minutes. I mean, I'm sorry, 5 months post-op. So I figured
Awesome.
if I was able to do it 5 months, then let me return to this spot. I was thinking of what to do for a National Day of Awareness, for the Miles for Hip, you know, day. And I'm like, well, and I was just kept thinking, well, why don't I do the hike? Why don't, and then someone, I didn't coin it, someone else said, yeah, Kelly, hippies hike. I was like, okay. So that's what
Love
I'm
it.
kind of known for in a very small segment of society, the hippies, the annual hippies hike. Um, and it just allows me to share my story. I wear the shirt, it's fun. And we had our youngest member's 2 years old. He had 5 hip surgeries. I met him through the hippies hike. And the first year he was in braces, wasn't able to hike. But the last year, guess what? He went all the way, you know, up the stairs. We couldn't, there was no stopping him. So, that's advocacy. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. To let everyone know about this and to have the youngest member join us, and then I'm the oldest member, so we get to show the public this is how it works. So it's a great picture. So we love doing
Love
the
that.
National Day of Movement. And then for June, I'm also doing some free yoga classes. Healthy hippie yoga class. I forgot what some of the places call it, but it's just an opportunity for me to show some nice yoga poses and then share my story.
I love that. That's amazing. What advice do you have for individuals with hip dysplasia or caregivers with hip dysplasia?
Advice for those with hip dysplasia: don't wait. You need to find your plan of what you want to do. There is a time sensitive piece to the diagnosis. And even though you're not in pain now, you still need a plan of the what ifs. As you know, with the PAO surgery, you have to qualify for it. I was amazed that I did qualify for it. And it's best to get it done because structurally it's not going to get any, it is the only thing to fix it, that or a hip replacement. I did not want a hip replacement. It was just a mentally block for me. I just did not want that label of having a hip replacement. So you think automatically that's for your 94-year-old grandmother. Well, she did have a hip replacement at 94. And so when you have the diagnosis, those are just things you need to think about for the lifespan. Okay, well, if I have hip dysplasia, it depends on what age group or age cohort you're in. Okay, then what's the plan? What are my options? And I think that's the most important thing. I recently had a 52-year-old client that was just open water swim, and then I noticed something with her hips, and I said, is something wrong with your hips? She said, yeah, I have hip dysplasia. I was like, oh, wait, wow, this changes a lot of things. And so and I said, when were you diagnosed? And it was several years ago. And I said, and did they tell you? And she said, no, I just, it's that denial. You just like kind of ignore it. And I'm like, you know what? Here's my surgeon's name. Here's the number. I strongly suggest you just make an appointment to get a baseline. And I think at the end of the conversation, she's supposed to call. And so I guess that's one of the main things. Once you're diagnosed, you need a plan, and it's a time sensitive plan of what to do. And of course, strength training is in there, and all your things for functional fitness or sports. And there are people that can hold off surgery for a while. I've had clients like that. I wasn't. As soon as my labrum tore, I mean, it shut me down. I couldn't do I could barely walk without limping. And so that just my time frame was accelerated from that point out. So I'm just speaking from experience about the time sensitive thing. Once you have the diagnosis, and then once you start to displaying symptoms. Um, I think what was the second part of the question? The caregivers.
Or caregivers of hip dysplasia?
Um, it's the caregivers that I had was post op, so I don't know. Keeping you have to stay movement. I mean, motion is lotion. All those things. Movement is medicine. Uh, Sedentary is the worst thing you can do. I do know that. That's you have to keep moving and strength training in order to have some quality of life.
Very much so. I think those are great answers. Tell us about an interaction with your surgeon or another healthcare professional along your hip dysplasia journey that was positive or influential to you.
Oh, there's many. I've had five. So let's see. Let me pick one. Um, I would say most influential was Dr. Faust and Dr. Greber allowed me to observe three PAO surgeries. That's like one of the top 10 epic things, like when it's your time to die, what are the things you want to remember? Those are going to be that was the top 10. That becoming an Ironman. Um, and the very first one I observed, it was a little girl, and she had heard of me because I was the hippies club lady, and she wanted to meet me before the surgery. And so Dr. Files brought me in there, and she was like super cool, super excited, a dancer, a little bitty thing, and she was just so excited that I was going to observe her surgery. And I was like, okay, this is surreal. What am I getting ready for? But that experience taught me so much. Just the seeing my surgeons interact that way, and then they treated me with this mutual respect, like I was on the same level as them, which but they made me feel that way. They were explaining all the cuts, they were explaining every step of the way what they were doing, and I'm just so grateful that I was able to experience that and to be so close to the patient, all the drilling. And if you would and at the end of the day, Dr. Greber asked me. He said, "And you still are going to sign up for the surgery?" And I'm like, "Well, yes." After you've seen it, and I said, "Well, this is the only way that fixes it." So yes, but that was a surreal experience. Just that respect with Dr. Faust and Dr. Greber and the whole team. And the attention to detail for this surgery, even in as you make all the cuts and the hardware, and this is picture up my hips and the hardware, so making the cuts and the corrections. I think with the last patient whose surgery I observed, I think it was maybe 1 millimeter that they were not happy with. It was something very small. They just weren't happy with it. And it was at the end of the surgery when they had all five or how many screws, hardware was in there. They took them all out and they started all over again until it was perfect. That
Yeah,
was incredible, and they just you have this incredible sense as they're, going through the bones and the tissues, and they just didn't feel right. I think a millimeter or something so small just didn't feel right. So they started all over again. And I mean, it didn't take long, whatever, the corrections were there until it was perfect. Now, those are the surgeons you need, right, on your team. And I felt so comfortable.
absolutely.
I was so grateful for them, and they care. They're so humble, the surgeons, and when the other surgeons, like the arthroscopic surgeons that I went to, when they compliment the PAO surgeons, it's like, whoa, it's a totally different playing field here. Just amongst the surgeons themselves, you can just see that hierarchy and that respect for them. And so that's one of the
That's
experiences that, yeah,
amazing.
I'll take for the rest of my life. And as you know, and as a provider, for me to see the way the surgery just helps me with the rehab part. I can help others. I'm like, hey, no, this is why this hurts because I saw what they did. This fascia and just the way the tissues were, dive into, and I was like, okay, now this makes sense of why I hurt like this post-op. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to change the way some of my rehab is because I know what it looked like in surgery.
It's amazing. The Miles for Hips Day of Movement is October again of this year. How do you plan to move?
The hippies hike. The hippies hike. It's on our literature. So we will be at Port Hudson State Historic Site at 9 o'clock. There's a museum there. It depends on who shows up. We do little introductions and we wear our shirts. And so, and we try to take as many pictures as we can. So that's where we will be. And as far as I know, and as long as I'm in Louisiana, I'll have the hippies hike. So that's what we're
That
known
is
for.
amazing. It was so amazing having you on today, Kelly. Thank you so much for everything. Um, Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us, everyone, for another patient experience interview. We'll join you on another day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ashley.